Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon Spotlight lecture. I am Nancy Burns. I am the Stoddard Curator for Prints, Drawings, and Photographs, and I'm also served as the curator for our current exhibition, New Terrain 21st Century Landscape, with considerable support from our assistant curator, Olivia Stone, assistant curator of Prints, Drawings, and Photographs. So please tip your hat to her. Before I start, I do want to tell everyone that our next Spotlight series is Jackson Davidow, who is a speaker who will be talking about the story of James Tellon, who is a Worcester artist who is the longtime partner, also a sculptor who was also the longtime partner of John O'Reilly, very prominent artist to come out of the city. That is Sunday, May 19th, 2 p.m. I will be here. Today's lecture is in support of our current exhibition, and I would like to thank the Bernard G. and Louise B. Palitz Fund, and also use this as a moment to remind you that this is being recorded and to ask you to confirm that you have silenced your phones. Sarah Sense, and with that, I would like to introduce our speaker. Sarah Sense is an artist from Sacramento, California. She received her BFA from California State University, Chico in 2003, and an MFA from Parsons, the New School of Design in New York in 2005. Sense has been extremely busy. She was the curator and director of the American Indian Community House Gallery from 2005 to 7, where she cataloged the gallery's 30-year history, a major accomplishment. Sense has been practicing photo weaving with traditional basket techniques from her Chitimacha and Choctaw family since 2004. Early works are based on Chitimacha landscape in Louisiana and Hollywood interpretations of native North America. Sense moved to South America in 2010 for research, where her work changed to include travel journals, landscape photography, and family archives, as well as telling stories to reveal indigenous histories, most notably her field research of native art from 12 different countries in the Western Hemisphere for the book and exhibition, Weaving the Americas. Her new works are inspired by her British Library visiting fellowship and include map and landscape weavings focused on colonial impact on climate, with purpose to conceptually reinstate indigeneity with traditional weaving patterns while decolonializing colonial maps. For me, this is a really special because I worked with our current contemporary curator, Samantha Cataldo, to commission a work from Sarah in 2023, and it is the work that is on display called A Plan of Boston, and it was a pleasure to have the opportunity to work with Sarah as she developed that object for our collection. With that, please welcome Sarah Sense.
There's a lot of you. I'm so honored. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the introduction, Nancy. The show's beautiful. If you haven't had a chance to see it yet, it's an absolute pleasure to be here in Worcester and to be a part of this exhibition. Ashna Ishkapsh, Sarah Sense Hi'i, Chitimacha Hi'i, Choctaw Hi'i. Hello, my name is Sarah Sense. I am Chitimacha and I am Choctaw. I'm going to give a brief overview of the progress of my work over the past 2 decades. This has been a remarkable journey for me, and I'm so touched that I get to be exhibiting and visiting museums and to be guests, I guess, at a museum such as this. I just want to say it's really like a dream come true for me. And I appreciate everybody that takes time out of their day to listen to what I have to say or to look at what I make. It comes from a place of a very spiritual space, a very delicate, carefully thought through space. And I hope that you enjoy what I'm going to share today, which is that journey where I'm always trying to keep in mind that I'm following not just my ancestors, but my own heart and my own family history, and with consideration of all of the weavers before me. This is a basket by John Paul Darden. He's a Chitimacha basket weaver who still lives on the reservation in Sharonton, Louisiana. Our reservation is very small and our population is under 2,000 people. Some would say that the Chitimacha basket tradition is one of the most beautiful, and in my opinion, I believe that it is, and that's because of how small the reed is and how tightly woven the baskets are. A lot of these baskets are also a double weave, where you weave on the outside and the inside and then lidded. So it's essentially 4 different baskets that are woven together. There are 3 basket weavers who I have a relationship with: John Paul Darden, Melissa Darden, and Scarlett Darden. This basket from John Paul Darden was woven in 2004, and I purchased it from him with money that probably came from scholarship money, or I don't know, wherever the gracious people that support grad school, that money comes from. So it was a big purchase for me at the time. But I also knew that I wanted to incorporate weaving into my fine art discipline. During this same visit, I met with our then chairman, Al LeBlanc, and explains that I wanted to use non-traditional material to create baskets, and wasn't really exactly sure how it was gonna look. At this time, I didn't know that it was gonna be photography, but I first needed to kind of get like a blessing and some reassurance that that was okay and that I wasn't going to be offending anybody by doing this. This is the Bayou, Bayou Teche, where the reservation is now. Bayou Teche is on the Atchafalaya River. This watery, swampy part of Louisiana is a very special place for me, and I think all Chitimacha people. We are water people, we're swamp people. We existed, our culture director, Kim Walden, has explained to me that it is from Texas to Louisiana, and that is ancestral homelands to Chitimacha. And we're now in this very small part, just off the Gulf, in a small town called Sharonton. So when I was going back there regularly in the summer, I was doing a summer youth program. One of these small buildings was a tanning salon. At the time I was living in New York, going to Parsons, but I grew up in California. And I guess in the early 2000s, I don't know if people are tanning now, but this was like a thing. And my brother and I just thought it was very, I mean, I don't have to explain the irony of native tan shop on a reservation. So that image became the first that I wove. I gave this to my brother because I think that he really did inspire the thoughts for me about the irony of the tanning salon, and encouraged me to take a photo. And we had, we kind of, just our conversation about that really did give me like some confidence to do something with that image. That, and then of course the conversation with Al LeBlanc, and then the basket from John Paul Darden. So this is sort of the launch pad for my weaving career, and I guess my weaving life. So Shortly after I left working for institutions, I found myself very deliberately in South America and Central America working on the project Weaving the Americas. After being at the American Indian Community House in New York, I learned more about indigenous communities and indigenous artists from all of the Americas, and I was really struck by the idea that this isn't just a movement that was coming out of New York or the United States or Santa Fe, for example, but something that was happening in Canada and in Central America and South America. And I was eager to find out what other contemporary things were being made. On that journey, I was photographing landscapes. So this is Bolivia. This is a hike on a volcano in Chile. In very northern Patagonia. While I was doing this photography and this research, I was going and meeting with the artists. And like I said, in the beginning of that search, I was looking for contemporary art. What I found instead were traditional artists who were creating things that were really about their community and about their landscape and about their connectedness to land. And so it changed my whole perspective or mission of what I was looking for. And I think that for curators, that's always the biggest lesson is that it's not your idea that's driving a project, a book, or an exhibition. It's actually the artists. And in this case, it was getting back to the land, going back to the roots, rather than trying to find something that was so contemporary and speaking to, something that might end up in the Guggenheim or a major museum, but rather this is what these artists were making. I did over 60 interviews with artists in 12 different countries. Most of my travel was by bus, taxis, boats to get to the artists. And we then did recorded interviews, which were transcribed in some very specific interviews. They were in original indigenous languages that were then transcribed and translated into Spanish and then into English, and the book is in English and Spanish. This is Mamani in Bolivia. In the end of the journey, I was in Santiago, Chile, and did a residency at a gallery there where I created these large weavings. The black and white image in the background is a black and white photo silk screen. I did the silk screens in Banff at the Banff Center, where I spent 3 winters doing artist residencies and working on developing different photographic processes that I would apply to my practice. All of these prints, there was over 100, I can't remember exactly, but I flew them down to Santiago, dropped them off, and then flew back to California to do to begin my interview travel process. So that when I arrived by bus in Santiago, pretty exhausted, but quite invigorated, I had those prints ready to weave on. And then I printed the landscapes and wove them over the prints. So without using inches, I'm gonna just explain. Imagine 2 sliding glass doors to go to the garden. That's about the size of these pieces. These 2 pieces are at the National Gallery in Canada. I then went to Southeast Asia to continue my search for indigenous art and artists. This is in northern Thailand in Chiang Mai. These landscapes, again, this body of work is called Weaving Water. So the landscapes that I'm working with are from the Caribbean and Southeast Asia, and I was thinking a lot about the movement of water and the way that cultural things, but also people, music, all these things that move through water by boat, and historically have really changed the way that, I think a lot of colonial constructs are big because of movement through water. And that's what this Weaving Water research was about. The circular paper that you see in these works are bamboo paper that I had made for me by a bamboo paper maker in Lampang. His name is Mr. Supan, and he is a very renowned paper maker in Thailand, but you can only work with him or buy his paper if you're in Thailand. And he calls this the back of the moon, or the moon's shadow. And the yellow bamboo paper he calls the moon. So all of the Weaving Waterworks has this round element to it. Going back to Louisiana is an important part of my, my research and my work. I try to go back there as often as I can to photograph landscape, meet with friends and family, and just think about that relationship of those ancestral homelands to my weaving practice. This particular piece was commissioned by the Alexandria Museum of Art. This is 16 pieces. Oh, 15. These are 15 pieces. It's 15 images of a sunset on the bayou. So I took 15 photos of the same sunset, and then at the top you can see there's the round and then different elements. This is at the Center for Visual Arts in Denver. On the left is small works from Weaving Water, and that's all on the bamboo. And then on the right is some of the round bamboo paper with the photographs all mounted on watercolor paper, and then wallpaper that I started working with when I was in Bristol, England. England is where the Weaving Water exhibition debuted in 2013. This is the first time that I really started working with maps. It was specifically for the wall installations. So that round sort of like starburst that you can see decorated around the wallpaper are maps of Bristol, England, and the UK that I was putting on a rather like colonial looking wallpaper. And then the Weaving Water images all have some drawing elements and journal writing elements, and it's called My Basket Story. So I wrote on the bamboo paper my story of how I came to weave. The same time I was doing this Weaving Water project, my grandma Chili, my Choctaw grandmother, was moving from her home in San Diego to a smaller assisted living home. And she had this huge basket collection. And those of us that were there to work with my grandma and help her move, she divided up her baskets for us. And it was which can be sad to see a grandmother move. It can be sad to see a grandmother kind of disassemble a collection. This is one of the baskets that she gave to me. So this is a Choctaw basket, and this is a Choctaw mat. So this was in 2012. A few years after that, in 2015, my husband and I moved to Ireland, and we wanted to research the potato famine and the Choctaw gift to Ireland. So I'm gonna back up in the image here. So this will be the first time that I start to use this sun and star pattern from the Choctaw basket weaving tradition. My grandma was the first to tell me of the story of the Choctaw gifting money to Ireland. And I think that this is a really beautiful story of empathy and sort of communities coming together to help one another out based on shared experiences. And I have a small paragraph that I'd like to read to you that will bring together what I was thinking about and what I was doing to come to this space and to make this work. This image here is of a Choctaw memorial, and it's very near to where my husband and I lived and where we had our first son. This is in Connemara, so we're in Connemara, just where Galway County meets Mayo County, if you're familiar with Ireland. And that loch or lake there, toward the end of it, that's where we lived. So it was very isolating. So all of these landscapes are of our home. And then there you can see that Choctaw pattern, the sun and stars. In 2013, I was invited to have an exhibition in Bristol and stayed. Stories were unfolding to me while circumstance created new realities. When I realized that Europe would hold me for longer than I would want, I began to consider various relevant research. The most exciting was a story that my grandma Chili told me about the Choctaw-Irish relationship and the Choctaw community gifting money to the Irish during the famine in the 1840s. The story goes, shortly after the Choctaw were removed and displaced in Oklahoma on the Trail of Tears, word reached the community that there was starvation in Ireland. The Choctaw gathered funds and sent the money to Ireland as a gift to help. I then incorporated some images of, this is my great-grandfather, my cousin's here, Jeff Bray. So this is also his great-grandfather. This is Osborne Blanche, and we're trying to get to the bottom right now. Jeff's helping me with the research. We're curious if Blanche is actually a Choctaw name, and if it is, how is it pronounced? So you can see his silhouette there. So that's a print of him, and then laid over that print of him is a print of water in Croatia. So before, in between England and Ireland, I was in Croatia for a couple of months, and that's a print on rice paper that I then waxed and ironed the wax off, so it kind of gives this effect that it's still wet and becomes transparent. From here on in my work, I'm using that technique in most of my weavings, but I didn't use it for this particular piece, which I can explain why later. That's my grandma Chili. So this is one of Osborne's daughters, and grandma's holding my mom, Charlotte. This is a very personal piece for me. My grandma gave me her writing just before she passed away. So after she gave me the baskets, I was having a show in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where all of these pieces were going to be exhibited. And she had been working on her memoirs in a writing class at CSU Fullerton. And she, the last time I saw her, gave me this text. And we talked about the Choctaw-Irish relation. She recorded the story did a recording of it for me, which I incorporated into a video. All of the writing she gave to me, I put into the work. And she said to me on our last conversation, don't write the sad stories. So any of the sad stories, I don't know if you can see on the right-hand side, the blue sky above that mountain, the story's written on the back and reversed, so you can't read it but it's there. So all the stories are woven together, and it's her life, but it's not something that you can see, but maybe you can feel. The last time I talked to her was on the phone, and I just finished this piece, and she was calling to wish my mom a happy birthday. And I said, that's really funny, Grandma, because I just finished this piece. I was at my parents' house, and she explained to me, she said, oh, a neighbor took that photo of your mom and I, and that was the first photo of your mom after she was born. So when Grandma called to wish Mom a happy birthday, this was Mom's basically birthday photo, and that was the last we talked. So it's so I just immediately gave the piece to my mom, so it's there. This is also with my mom. My mom chooses what she wants in it, which is fine. So these are Grandma's stories. The paper is sewn at the top. So there's thread sometimes in my work, which I'm interested in working more with. But this is probably, probably 4.5 feet by 3 feet. And all of the paper is written, the stories are written very small. So you can read them. That middle section with the photos through it, that's the sad part of her life that I obscured with the weaving. This is another part of that body of work, which is called Remember, which all of my work kind of moves from one series to another, like something is always sort of lingering from one and going into another. This work I did also while living in Ireland, and it was for the World Cultures Museum in Frankfurt, Germany. I wrote a poem after my son Archie was born, and I wrote it when he was about 2 weeks old, standing in front of Dew Loch, which is the lake that we lived very near to. And there's a poem that's written on the top and bottom of each panel, and there's 8 panels, and I'll read to you a part of that poem. Does water have memory like the trees that surround it? Can it remember the roots that drank it or the lungs that inhaled it? Can water remember the ancestors, the way land holds us in shallow graves? I can feel the presence when close to a calm lake, rushing river, or thunderous ocean. Bring me the calm and violent memories. Remind me of the past so that I don't forget that I am but a speck of dust. Then back to Louisiana. I'm always going back. So for this body of work, I asked community members to give me a name, a word, 1 to 3 words that would describe the bayou to them. There's 10 panels, and this one is home and peaceful. And you can see the adjacent piece is a weaving, and then the one with the English word is just a simple etching with ink that I did. In 2018, I went back to an older sort of theme in my work, which is cowgirls and Indians in Hollywood. I'm going to read something for this as well. Weaving these landscapes together with brightly contrasting Hollywood and pop culture imagery represents stereotypes of Native North America, questions the misconceptions of differing realities. Like photographs, stories are a recorded history, merging time and memory repeatedly, both orally and visually. I use posters and personas to explore American popular culture stereotypes in North America and in Hollywood cinema, fashion trends, and pop icons. Cowboy and Indian iconography are deeply rooted in America without recognition of the real history or the consequences of stereotypes. These generalizations are detrimental to the collective community and to the individual. Cowgirls and Indians explores these questions of identity and the influence of imagery on global consciousness. So I don't think I have to explain that at all. I think that's a world that we're all familiar with and that we live in, and that we're getting a lot of space and time to express those ideas. Again, grandmother's stories are written through the top of this, and that's Custer, and then that's me being one of my personas, the cowgirl. About a year after this, I was invited to do a fellowship at the British Library. I'm going to share a few of these maps that I was looking at. This map, this is a European map, very early. It's the earliest map that lives in the British Library. As you may or may not know, the library has all of the books, manuscripts, maps that used to be housed at the British Museum, and it's now separate. So all of your maps, manuscripts, books, and things are in the library, separate building, separate institution from the museum. So this particular map is called Cape Verde Islands to the Red Sea, 1339. Okay, so this is like a remarkable map, and I'm not a map archivist. I just like to look at them and photograph them and weave them and study them in whichever form that I can. All of the maps that I incorporate into my work, I've physically touched in some cases. I have looked at them without plastic over them. I've had them pulled out of archives for me. I don't work with things, I don't work with scans that are sent to me. I work with things that I can see and have some kind of a relationship with. And then I photograph them with my own camera so I can work on the resolution myself. This is my favorite map in the British Library Museum. If you look at just the drawing of the map, I think that it's in like the organs of the body, maybe a human body or the body of the deer. But if you turn it up and down, I think that those circles that are meant to represent a sort of like trade routes and trade connections between Native nations are actually act as like these different organs. And then the fort at the bottom, which becomes the grid, is kind of the intestines, or like how these things that were being made and collected then went into these like colonial towns. So that's how I interpret the map. And then of course the British Library then puts their big stamp on it. Everything gets turned this way, and then there's English words that are printed on it. So again, colonizing a map, and then how do we decolonize these ideas or decolonize these maps? It's kind of the question that I'm riddled with. Louisiana, I love this map. I just love how that Swift's Louisiana. So this image comes up a lot in my weavings. So during the pandemic, which I know is really hard for all artists and museums because exhibitions closed and contracts were canceled. And I can say that for me, I thought that was the end of my career. And the Florida State University contacted me and said, "We have a lot of money to spend. Can we give it to you?" And I was like, "That's awesome," and absolutely. And it was like a great, it breathed life back into my studio, and I got super excited. I was like, I'm gonna paint, I'm gonna draw, I'm gonna, I need this and that. So I got a new computer, I got a new, I got paints, I had this new studio that my husband had just built for me, and it was just kind of empty. And so with their grant money, they're like, yeah, we'll get you any supplies you want. And so I ended up weaving photos, and you can see here these gaps. I thought I was gonna write and draw and do all of these things. And when I was finished with the weaving, those spaces became something different and not necessarily something that had to be filled in. I felt guilty that I had gotten all this new paint and pencils from Florida State University, and I apologized, and they said, don't worry about it. But I think that's like artist guilt, I guess. So these are quite large. These are I guess 9 feet by 51 inches, whatever that makes it, 4.5 feet, I guess. So this is the first time that I worked with those maps. So I had all of these images from the British Library. I'd put together a huge proposal for the British Library with the intention of having an exhibition there. Was offered a date. We were working on an earlier date, and then COVID happened and the whole thing was canceled. And I think that was that's when I think maybe I felt like this is over, like my career's done. So I just put a lot of effort and intention into these large weavings, and I made them too big. I didn't consider the size when thinking about the framing and the mounting, and everyone was really kind and generous with me. I'm sure here at the museum, once you go over 4 feet by 8 feet, you're looking for custom glass and custom everything. So, oops, but we figured it out. These are some details from that work. all of the bottom of every piece has another one of my favorite maps from the library, the geological investigation of the alluvial valley of the lower Mississippi River from 1944, made by the Army Corps. And this map, you can see each color represents like the meandering of the river. And there's a key, which you can kind of see on there, which indicates an era or a year of where the river was. And I think that, again, going back to the purpose of mapping, if mapping is going to suggest where forts should go or where plantations should go, a map is then essentially used for warfare, a map is used for colonizing, it's used to move people. It's been used for all of these different colonial structures. And in this case, it's used to understand how to contain a river, a huge, huge, huge river. And I think I like this map so much because it's sort of a documentation of how much power the Mississippi River has. And is it really tameable? I think that's the big question. It's not. So that river is woven through each of these pieces, and you can see it there in those details. This text these are letters to the Queen in the 1700s. These are the original letters that I got to see at the library, which I photographed. A lot of it is about building the forts, plantations, movement of people, how Native people are working with the settlers. So again, just like colonial efforts that I'm then weaving and deconstructing and changing. So some of those words there you can see: government, colony, America. So Power Lines was my next big project, and this was for a solo show at Bruce Silverstein Gallery in New York. I worked with those same maps again, but in a square format, and I reintroduced the cowgirl and the Indian princess. And I'm gonna read something that explains sort of my reasoning for that. So there you can see the cowgirl is laying down and she has text over her. That's the Queen's writing. So it's addressing those complicated relationships of being Native and non-Native and tied to the land, being American, being Native American, being cowgirl and Indian. This is my sister in the lower right-hand corner. We learned how to shoot guns when we were about, I learned when I was 7 years old. So I have pictures of me as a child with guns. And there, of course, is Custer. And there's my sister again with a shotgun. I don't know if you can see it on the right. And then Sitting Bull. This piece is at the Hood Museum, Dartmouth. This piece is at the Montclair Art Museum in New Jersey. I'm going to read something again. This is the last time that I'll read. The archives of both documents and maps act as evidence to murder and genocide, while the Hollywood imagery exposes an industry's power play on historical trauma to dumbify actualities that continue to persist in memory. Like blood pulsing through our bodies or cypress tree roots drinking water from the bayou, the memory persists. Interweaving the personas with Louisiana landscapes of Chitimacha ancestral lands ties current contemporary Native life and environment, conceptually losing a gap between historical and contemporary time, much like memory. This unique rhythm spins an historical web, entangling sad realities of war and genocide while honoring ancestral basket weaving. Like webs, the spun stories swirl in circles, mirroring the porcelain charts from the cartographic artists, beginning with the British Library's earliest maps, charts of the world, from the Cape Verde Islands of the Red Sea to the investigation of the alluvial valley of the lower Mississippi River in 1844. As the pieces move through a cartographic chronology, the aesthetics of coastlines and reference points draw lines, shaping circles, layered lines with imagery from stories, visually implying indigenous perspectives of colonial effects of climate change on community and landscape, assimilation as marginalization, and loss of tradition and culture with loss of land. These maps, along with settlers' letters to the monarchy, layered over each other with photographs, then interwoven with Chitimacha and Choctaw basket patterns, re-indigenizes the objects, cutting the paper into strips and opening them, moving them apart to create space for differing interpretations, and reinserting indigenous patterns from the very same location where the ancestors were removed, taken, and killed is a process of decolonizing. This is a map that was shared with me by the maps curator at the library. So when I was looking at the maps, I was interested in some of the language that was just kind of like a example of how Native people were being treated. So that's a detail of that piece. It's a larger piece. This is at the Victoria Albert Museum. This is New France. This is at the Yale Museum. Okay, and this is here. So when I was asked to do this piece, this is the first commission that went through the gallery rather than through me, and I was like, oh, well, I need to talk to Nancy because I'm not sure what she wants, and I can't just make things, like we have to, talk about it. So all of any anxiety or concern I had when I met Nancy on a Zoom call was gone. I mean, obviously the intention was totally genuine, and it was a really fantastic piece for me to make because it started off as a basket. And there's 20 pieces in that Power Line series, and so this becomes piece number 21, and it's the one piece that was in my studio that didn't finish, and it's about Boston and Plymouth. And so if you look in the center, you can see the pattern blackbird's eye and rabbit's tooth, which is Chitimacha, and then around that is landscapes that are woven using that Choctaw sun and stars. So you have landscapes from California, where I currently live, and then landscapes of Louisiana woven into two maps, the map of Plymouth and then the map of Boston. The titles of all of my works from Power Lines are words that I found in the actual piece. So they're all words from the maps. So this piece in the top, it says Plan of Boston. This is so I put this image in there so you can see part of the process of how I work. So these are rice paper prints. They've already been waxed and ironed. So it has this sort of like soft, gentle texture to it. This was a commission for the Longmont Museum in Denver. And for this, I went to, I think, 6 different institutions and into the archives. The bottom row, you can see root specimens from their botanical gardens, along with some buffalo bone specimens from the Nature and Science Museum in Denver. At the Denver Historical Society, I found some images of Denver before it was built up as a city. So these are photographs of like orchards. There's buffalo. There were pictures of Native people like walking through there. I didn't want to include those because I don't know, that's not my, it's not Chitimacha or Choctaw. So I didn't have the permission to use it. So I'm really, when I'm putting images in, I'm really careful about who is it and where my permission is coming from, and do I need permission. Above that is the botanical gardens, the rainforest. So kind of thinking about how while those like indigenous animals such as the buffalo are no longer living there, but there's a huge effort to present to the community of Denver what a rainforest looks like. So the irony of what we remove and then what we bring in, what we enter into those spaces. Above that are trail maps from covered wagons used, again, movement, displacement. Then with the paper woven through it, we have a lot of that sun and star pattern again, and the blackbird eye rabbit's tooth. These two pieces are going back to Choctaw. They're going to be in the lobby of a new hotel that they've just opened up earlier this month. And there's the four together. Okay, so family landscape. Cousin Bray here. Here is land where his father lives now. This is a river kind of like behind where he lives. It's the Mount Fork River. This is in McCurtain County. I think it's a really special place. This is where my grandma grew up. This is where your grandma grew up. Our grandmas were sisters and best friends, I'd say, Opal and Chili. And there's just a lot of family history here. And the next body of work, which I'll get through in 5 minutes, is that okay? Is all based on allotment maps. So I don't know if you guys know this, but after the Trail of Tears, when there was removal, for me, I'm talking about Choctaw because that's my family, where our ancestors were removed from Mississippi, brought to Oklahoma, and then given land. You get a allotment plot. So this blue map that you can see on the left, that's an allotment map. When the Choctaw Cultural Center asked me to make new works for them, my response was, what maps do you have? What can you share with me? Because I want it to be about the removal. I want it to be about the land. And I was looking more for like trail maps, and they brought out for me 40 of these allotment maps. And they're blue. And this is their pretty much like the original color. They're an okay shape, but each, I'm gonna go over here again. So each like square has a name, an age, and how native, how Choctaw that individual was. So full blood, half, quarter, and it was just a documentation of who owned what land, and it was a map. There's 40 of them, and we think that they kind of piece together, right? So with those maps, I then wove through it some maps from a journal of Lewis and Clark expedition that I went and viewed at the St. Louis Historical Society in Missouri. So here, any of that like swirly line movement, that's Lewis and Clark expedition. I probably don't have to explain that that expedition was yet another way for the federal government to understand how to colonize and move things across the country, but also how to work with people. So these pieces are all with those 4 pieces are all with Choctaw. Here's some details so you can see the map more closely. And here I am working on them so you can see the size. Mounting. And so this is my current body of work, and it's pronounced Hinoshi, and that means trail in Choctaw. I have to show you something in this piece, so I don't have a detail. When I finished it, I noticed there's skulls everywhere, so you can see there. Maybe you can't see from back there, but there's skulls that appeared like all over the piece, and it's one of the only pieces that has just ancestral landscapes and allotment maps in it. So it doesn't have any Hollywood, it doesn't have any of the Lewis and Clark maps, it's just ancestors, and so I think they were showing me things. And then this is sort of a one-off from those ones. Got a little creative in the studio that day. And there they are, framed. This was for a Paris photo. When I was in London this summer, my husband and I were looking for maps of Oklahoma to incorporate into these allotment maps. And what came up were a lot of oil maps from that same era. So these next 4 pieces have the oil maps of Oklahoma woven through the allotment maps. And it just happened that around the same month of Paris photo, when these pieces were up, the movie Killers of the Flower Moon came out, and this is the same story, right? Like, here's the oil and here's the native land. And so again, McCurtain County, this is Fred Bray's property. Here you can see the haystacks and the landscape, and we were all there recently for the eclipse, which was directly over Broken Bow in McCurtain County. This is going to be up next week, or I guess later this week, at APAD in New York City. So this is all 2024 work. This is what I've just finished before coming on this trip. Thank you.
I would very much like to say thank you to Sarah. It's hard for artists to talk about their own work, and she does it quite beautifully. We have time for maybe 2 questions. Except I have one, so we have 3.
Okay.
You said that you did not do the waxing on ours. Why not?
Okay, because so the timing of the commission and how it came through, I had already finished power lines, and I had that one incomplete piece. And it was, so when I weave a basket, same way as weaving a traditional basket, you're weaving from the center, like a square, and then it comes up, right? So there's an article that Max Karachi wrote called Squaring the Circle. And I think that that's exactly that concept. You're working with lines that are going to create a grid and a square, and then they move up, and then you're making a circle on the top. The wax paper is really, the waxy rice paper is very like delicate and wouldn't be able to have the same integrity as the bamboo paper that I work with to hold a basket. So that's why, and because of the commission and what I wanted to do, like already having that thing unfinished in my studio that related to this area. I mean, it was all kind of meant to be. And rather than like, and I went back and forth, like, do I reprint images and do I include this? But it was already there, and it was kind of like, it was perfect. So I finished it off by doing that Choctaw weave on the outside, which kind of gives, if you look at it, you're looking at, there's 2 different dimensions, because one is looking down at a map and the other is looking up at a landscape. So the landscape is around and the map is in the center going down. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I love that our work is actually truly tied to the potential of being a basket. That's
and also to the original series, which I think is important, rather than going back and revisiting images. Yeah. It's a part of that original thing. It just was never finished. So it's perfect.
Okay, 2 questions. Yes?
Just one question.
Yeah.
You're doing all this weaving, it's so visually beautiful.
Thank you.
What about the materiality of handling it? Is that ever possible?
The materiality of handling it?
Yeah.
For like you to handle it?
So, I wouldn't touch it.
I always want to touch other people's art. Like, I find that really hard. I touched something in the Isabella Gallery yesterday. I couldn't help myself. It was a chair, and I knew it was painted, and I just had to feel it, so I just did. It's all going to be behind glass. I mean, the thing is, like, because it's photography and any sort of like fingers or whatever, but no, that's a good question, because I suppose that perhaps if there was an exhibition of things that you could access through touching with the intention of it, kind of being thrown away afterwards or no longer being accessible. I'll think on that. Thank you. No, it's true. I actually have something else to say about that, because that's a really good question. When I go into archives to look at baskets, and I don't know if you guys have a basket collection here, but when I go and look at baskets, I ask to hold it without gloves on, because I feel like I'm touching the hands of the maker. And a lot of times the Chitimacha baskets, that maker from the turn of the century is my great-great-grandmother, Delphine Stoof. And so I feel like that's really important that I'm holding your hand, but I'm very delicate. And I have to get permission from the curator.
Anyone else? Interesting. Well, good. Delaney, also extremely helpful for the exhibition. I did not give her props, and she deserves some.
Thank you for this incredible talk. It's really,
Thank you.
The images you showed today are just stunning.
Thank you.
So I'd love to know, are there any exciting exhibition projects coming up in your near future that you're looking forward to on the horizon?
That's a great question. I think I'm in multiple group shows this season, and I'm not sure where. I had a wonderful exhibit with Bruce Silverstein in the Powerline show, and
Which is when I first saw her work.
and a lot of institutions collected from that show, which I'm so grateful for. And I haven't done a complete follow-up of what those shows are, if that makes sense. But because I don't have to actively participate in getting the work there because it's in their collection now, so that's different for me. I feel very blessed and grateful for that. So what I have to make this summer to prepare for is, from what I understand, Miami, Basel, Paris Photo, the Armory, and then I'm having a solo show at Bruce Silverstein in the fall. So that's like my focus right now.
All right, many thanks. I really do hope that many of you come down and see the exhibition. It really is, I have to say, it's a beautiful show. It really is. Thank you again.